All right, today we're diving into one of the most powerful critiques of the modern world ever written, Charles Dickens' 1854 novel, Hard Times. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What can a book from over 150 years ago really tell us about our own lives? Well, you're about to find out it has a lot to say.
So, right out of the gate, the novel doesn't welcome you in. It makes a demand. This isn't just an introduction, it's a declaration of war. That repetition of the word facts, it feels aggressive, almost like someone's hammering it into your head. And just like that, Dickens lays out the central conflict for the entire story.
Because you see, this book isn't really about a stuffy old school in 19th century England. No, it's about an entire society, a whole philosophy that is actively trying to crush the very idea of imagination.
And the man leading this charge is Thomas Gradgrind. His entire worldview is built on this really rigid, dehumanizing idea. For him, if you can't measure something, if you can't count it or put it in a chart, it's not just worthless, it's dangerous.
So Dickens sets up this epic showdown right from the start. In one corner, you've got fact, the world of logic, usefulness, and cold, hard data. And in the other corner, you have fancy, the world of emotion, spontaneity, and pure imagination. The whole book is basically arguing that a life lived only by the rules of fact isn't really a life at all.
Yeah, Gradgrind doesn't really do subtle. His mission is to literally wipe the word fancy off the map. And, more importantly, out of the minds of these kids. He wants to stamp out every last instinct they have to dream, to wonder, or to see the world as anything more than a big pile of data.
It sounds completely extreme, right? Who would ever think this is a good idea? But you gotta ask yourself, what kind of world creates a man like Thomas Gradgrind? What was happening at the time that made this obsession with facts seem not just reasonable, but, necessary? To really get Gradgrind, we need to zoom out. Because he didn't just appear out of nowhere. He is a direct product of one of the biggest, most earth-shattering shifts in all of human history, the Industrial Revolution, which was completely transforming England at the time.
And the engine of all this change was, well, quite literally, the steam engine. Suddenly, everything was different. This machine became the new driving force of history, kicking off a whole new age of mechanization that changed the world forever.
And you really can't overstate how huge this was. The entire way people worked was just upended. We went from a world of skilled craftspeople making things by hand to a totally new system of massive factories just churning out goods on a scale nobody had ever imagined.
But all this so-called progress came at a massive human cost. A key part of it was this idea of the division of labor. It sounds efficient, right? But what it really meant was that a worker wasn't a skilled craftsman anymore. Instead, you became a cog in a giant machine, performing one tiny, repetitive task over and over and over again. This economic earthquake created a brand new kind of society. You suddenly had two distinct classes, the capitalists who owned the factories and the working class who toiled in them. And guess whose ideas started to run the show? The owners, of course. And what did they care about? Efficiency, profit, and results you could count. Sound familiar?
Now here's where it gets really chilling. This industrial mindset didn't just stay in the factories. As Dickens so brilliantly shows us, it started to leak out, like smoke, and seep into the very places that were supposed to shape young minds, schools.
Dickens uses this incredibly powerful metaphor to show how kids were seen in this new system. They weren't viewed as unique human beings with their own thoughts and their own curiosity.
Oh no. Instead, they were treated like empty containers, little pitchers, whose only job was to be filled to the absolute brim with an endless fire hose of approved, quantifiable facts. There was literally no room left for them to think for themselves.
Dickens is so clever, he even puts his critique right there in the characters' names. Get this. The teacher's name isn't Mr. Smith or Mr. Jones, it's M. Choakumchild. I mean, come on. His name is his job description, to choke the natural spirit of a child with a nonstop barrage of facts.
So the school is no longer a garden where minds can grow. Instead, it's a mill of knowledge. And believe me, that word mill is no accident. Dickens chose it specifically to connect education to the mechanical, repetitive, and totally soul-crushing work of an industrial factory.
And the end result of all this is a system that is profoundly dehumanizing. It's designed from the ground up to crush the very qualities that make us who we are, our ability to create, to feel for others, to think for ourselves. It just replaces that creative human impulse with mechanical repetition.
But here's the thing.
Dickens wasn't just complaining about his own time. He was asking this massive, fundamental question about what education is even for and what it means to be human. And that question is maybe more relevant today than it has ever been.
This is really the heart of Dickens's warning. He saw the logic of the factory, efficiency, standardization, production, leaking out and being applied to manufacture minds, not just products. He saw a war being waged on the human spirit itself.
And so that leaves us with one last, really urgent question for our own time. In an age that is so driven by data, by analytics, by algorithms, how do we stop ourselves from building our very own fact factories? How do we protect that essential, beautiful, and completely unmeasurable part of ourselves, our capacity for wonder, imagination, and fancy?